Let's start with Governor Christie gave his State of the State today. What is he thinking now? What is the Christie posture about the latest developments, as far as you can tell, about Jeb and about Romney?
If you, at the beginning of fourth quarter 2014, had asked any of these guys, including Christie, when they had to make a final decision to make moves, they all believed they had space and time. Jeb very deftly laid low. People didn't know about his planning. He popped a surprise late in the fourth quarter of 2014. Grabbed, early mover advantage, impressed donors, certainly in New York and Boston last week. I think it scrambled everyone's plans, and they all believe they've got to move up their timetable.
Christie's usually a pretty confident guy. What do you think he thinks about the prospect of taking on Romney and Bush? Underdog against two guys who've run, and in Romney's case, and from a national political family in Jeb's case, or he's Chris Christie confident?
I think Chris Christie's confident. I also think that the dynamic of more big players in the mainstream space of the primary is helpful for Christie, because it's having the effect of freezing out a lot of donors. Right now, a lot of donors who, there was some early enthusiasm for Jeb last week. These things is very fluid. I do think Romney's entry kind of freezes things to the extent that Jeb's early entry sped things up. I think the Romney entry actually slows things down to some degree, and it's not a bad dynamic for Christie.
All right, let's move to Romney, and again, give us a thought bubble. Be Mitt. Speak as if you were Mitt Romney. What is Mitt thinking here in terms of, is he definitely doing it? Does he think he needs to go fast? Be Romney. Channel Romney.
This is me, though. It's not.
It's what you think he's thinking. What is he thinking?
I think Romney and the people who are encouraging Romney to run, the theory of the race was there could be a real crack-up in the primary. That crack-up would happen late. There would be no obvious front runner. It would be fractured, fragmented, ugly, and the party, both the donor community and the elites, the party elites, the conservative elites, would need a unifying force, a tested, vetted unifying force to come in late and save them.
What's he thinking?
But now, what I think happened last week is Jeb was in town. He met with a lot of donors and was energizing.
Not just in this town, but in Boston.
In Boston as well. Well, yeah, well, interesting. While Christie was also in Boston, but he met with a bunch of donors. I was struck by the positive impression that he made on all these donors. These donors had felt in the past that Jeb was ambivalent, wishy-washy. Some of them even said he was naive to think he could run a, quote, he'll only run if he can run a joyful campaign. A lot of the buzz coming out of these meetings was that Jeb sounded strong, assertive, ready to go. And so, of course, that got back to Romney. He's got strong ties with his own donor community, many members of which are meeting with Jeb. And I think that left one with the impression that he needs to shoot a flare.
But what happens in his head?
I need to fire a flare. I need to send a signal.
Because it turns out I don't want Jeb Bush to be the nominee.
It turns out if I want to be president, I have to shoot a flare sooner before all these donors and party leaders or movement leaders get behind another guy who could play that unifying force. It's not to say I don't want Jeb to be president. If I want a shot at being president, I got to make a move earlier.
And it's your sense that he just made this decision to fire the flare over the course of a week or a week and a half because of Jeb. This wasn't a long term.
I don't know. It doesn't. My impression was that the timeline was longer term. I didn't get the impression from him that he was planning an early move. I think there was again. It's easy to overstate these spikes in momentum, but there was a lot of buzz among donors from Jeb's visit to New York and Boston last week, and I think that had an impact on Mitt's.
Let me ask you about Jeb and what you think he's thinking about a particular thing, which is, so he does his stuff. You got to say the reviews of what he did, the surprise, the positive, as you said, the donors, all going well. Then Romney does this thing back, and word comes out that Romney is saying Jeb doesn't know how to run as a businessman, Jeb doesn't know how to deal with immigration. Knowing Jeb as you do, how do you think he's reacting to this little elbow from Romney world?
I think he is. His attitude is he's just going to march forward. He's not going to look. The reality is, if this becomes Jeb versus Romney, it's going to be an ugly race. It will probably get pretty personal pretty quickly. Because it's not about. It's hard to say. It's just over the course of the next 12 to 15 months.
Because they're too similar.
It's not going to be ideology that divides them. So it's a more respectful race, ironically, would be Ted Cruz versus Mitt Romney or Ted Cruz versus Jeb Bush, because it would be about ideas and ideology and direction of how they kind of run the country. The Romney-Jeb thing could get pretty nasty pretty quickly. I think Jeb is going to be pretty disciplined. My impression is about not getting dragged into it early. But these things, as you know, take on a life of their own.
Let's talk about Ryan, who you also are very close to. Paul Ryan, and worked with in the last campaign and have known for a long time. Paul Ryan says he's not running. when we interviewed him during his book tour, he suggested if Mitt ran, he'd be for Mitt because Mitt had put him on the ticket. That's kind of traditional. Where does his head at in terms of this non-decision and how he appraises the field?
He first of all, made the decision that he could either be a constructive force in Congress and, to borrow his phrase, make divided government work, or he could run for president, but he couldn't do both. He couldn't work on things like immigration reform and a budget agreement with Patty Murray and some of these other issues he has an ambitious agenda for Ways and Means Committee. He can't do these things and run for president. And so as soon as he and Mitt lost, he got deep into trying to make Washington work. And he thinks the next 2 years he wants to try and do comprehensive tax reform. Look, these things are long shots, but he wants to try and do it. He can't do those things and run for president. He made the decision before Mitt made his announcement and before he and Mitt spoke about it. Now, he's not John Edwards. He wouldn't, say, well, I'm running no matter what against the guy who put me on the ticket. So it is, on the one hand, true that he made his decision before Mitt made his announcement. It is also true that Paul wouldn't run against Mitt Romney.
Yeah, one question, the beard, is that still the tried and true political giveaway? There's no chance anybody wearing a beard will ever run for
holding out for the
president?
Packers. Come on. This is a guy. The Packers
Better
hang
than
in
an
there,
orange
the
sweater?
beard stays on. Seahawks crush the Packers this weekend. I'm willing to bet the beard
Razor
comes out.
out.